The day the aliens landed wasn't particularly special. No dramatic weather, no strange astronomical phenomena. Just a run-of-the-mill Tuesday in October when humanity discovered we were, in fact, not alone in the universe. The ships hovering about 300 feet above major cities worldwide looked disappointingly like flying saucers. As if the aliens had watched our B-movies and thought, yes, that seems like a sensible design. For 37 minutes, humans collectively lost their minds. Religious zealots proclaimed the end times. Conspiracy theorists screamed vindication from their basements. World militaries went to DEF CON, whatever means we're all totally screwed. And then the aliens transmitted their first message. Hello, we come in peace. Sorry about the ships, our engineers have a questionable sense of humor. Is this a bad time? Thus began humanity's inaugural stumble into galactic diplomacy. Within 48 hours, the United Nations cobbled together the Intergalactic Relations Committee, a name that would later be mocked across 17 star systems for its presumptuous use of intergalactic, when dealing with species from our own Milky Way. The committee consisted of diplomats, scientists, military personnel, and inexplicably a celebrity chef who had once cooked for 3 world leaders. No one questioned his presence. Everyone was too busy panicking in their most professional manner. The aliens, calling themselves the Collective of Advanced Species or CAS, which unfortunately translated in one Earth language as cheese fart, were surprisingly patient with humanity's flailing attempts at diplomacy. They introduced Earth to the galactic community, a loose alliance of 27 spacefaring civilizations who had been watching us for centuries with the kind of bemused interest one might have for a particularly clumsy puppy learning to navigate stairs. What fascinated the aliens most, however, was humanity's approach to risk assessment, or rather, our spectacular lack thereof. You develop nuclear weapons before reliable sunscreen, noted the CAS ambassador, a 7-foot, iridescent being named Quirt. You explored deep oceans with equipment that would crush like aluminum cans. You sent humans to the moon using computers less powerful than what you now use to share pictures of your Earth cats. Fascinating. Enter Jack Hawkins, Earth's accidental diplomat extraordinaire. Jack hadn't planned on representing humanity. Before the aliens, he'd been a disaster management consultant for international aid organizations, essentially cleaning up messes after other humans made catastrophically poor decisions. He spoke 7 languages, had diffused tense situations on 6 continents, and possessed what his colleagues called pathological calmness in the face of stupidity. The UN drafted him after the 3rd diplomatic incident, when a well-meaning representative asked the methane-breathing Havaraxians if they'd like to grab lunch and share a smoke. The subsequent evacuation of the Geneva building due to an interspecies respiratory crisis was still being discussed in hushed tones. Jack's official title became diplomatic troubleshooter, which alien translators consistently rendered as human who stops other humans from being stupid. Jack preferred the alien version. Okay, listen. Jack addressed the hastily assembled diplomatic team on his first day. These beings traverse interstellar space. They've probably solved problems we haven't even identified yet. Our job isn't to impress them, it's to not horrify them into leaving us behind as a galactic cautionary tale. Unfortunately, Jack didn't know that he was already too late. The aliens had discovered something about humans that would shake the foundations of interspecies relations, our casual relationship with catastrophic potential. Or as they would soon learn to fear it, the human phrase, "What's the worst that could happen?" Jack first noticed the problem during a routine cultural exchange. Whenever humans uttered those 6 fateful words, "What's the worst that could happen?" nearby alien delegates would twitch, flinch, or in the case of the gelatinous Blorpians, change color from a placid blue to an alarmed magenta. "It's just an expression," Jack explained to Krell, a reptilian diplomat whose species, the Vexidorians, prided themselves on meticulous planning and risk prevention. Krell had 3 rows of teeth, scales that shifted like oil on water, and the demeanor of an interstellar tax auditor. "An expression that precedes disaster with startling regularity," Krell replied, consulting a holographic tablet. "We've been monitoring your broadcasts. This phrase appears to trigger a cascade of unfortunate events among humans." Jack laughed. "That's just coincidence, or confirmation bias." Krell's inner eyelids narrowed. Is it? Allow me to present Exhibit A, the Sao Paulo incident. The hologram shifted to footage of a televised stunt where a human daredevil, preparing to jump his motorcycle over a line of flaming buses, uttered the infamous phrase to a reporter. The subsequent crash destroyed 3 buses, a news van, and a surprisingly resilient portable toilet that pinballed through the crowd like a fecal pinball machine. Miraculously, no one died, a fact that Krell noted only encouraged similar behavior. Exhibit B, the Antarctic Research Station. Another footage clip showed scientists testing a new thermal drilling system. What's the worst that could happen? One asked, seconds before they accidentally accessed a pocket of prehistoric methane that sent their equipment and their careers up in a spectacular plume of flame. And finally, Exhibit C, the International Space Station Karaoke Night. This footage showed astronauts rigging a makeshift karaoke machine using station equipment. A female astronaut shrugged and said the phrase just before launching into total eclipse of the heart, which somehow caused a power surge that reoriented the station's solar panels and briefly threatened to send it tumbling from orbit. Jack winced. Okay, those are unfortunate examples, but we have cataloged 1,247 similar incidents in the past Earth year alone, Krell interrupted. Your species invites calamity with remarkable casualness. It's just a figure of speech that acknowledges uncertainty, Jack protested. No, Krell's tail twitched with agitation. It's a challenge to the universe. My species has a similar phrase that translates roughly to "may all variables be accounted for," which we whisper reverently before any endeavor. Yours is like shouting "surprise me" at the cosmic forces of chaos. Jack began to understand why the aliens had created a special diplomatic unit just for human interactions. They weren't worried about human aggression, they were terrified of human recklessness. Krell continued, his voice dropping to a concerned whisper. Do you know what happens when a Zorblaxian expedition commander utters their equivalent of your phrase? They're immediately relieved of duty and subjected to psychological evaluation. That seems excessive, Jack remarked. Does it? The last Zorblaxian who officially wondered about worst-case scenarios triggered the collapse of a moon. A moon, Jack Hawkins. Their species now has a ring system they didn't previously want or need. Jack made a mental note to add this phrase to the Diplomatic Communication Advisory List, a document that was rapidly becoming longer than the UN Charter. I'll make sure the committee understands the cultural sensitivity around this expression, Jack promised. Krell's scales rippled with skepticism. See that you do. The Galactic Council is already debating whether Earth should be classified as a caution, unpredictable outcome zone. Only black holes and quantum anomalies currently have that designation. As Jack left the meeting, he didn't realize that the universe was about to provide the ultimate test case for human risk assessment, or that he would be standing at its center when everything went spectacularly sideways. The first interstellar diplomatic summit on Earth was a big deal. The kind of big deal that made world leaders nervously check their hair and breath mints before appearances. 17 alien species had agreed to visit our humble, somewhat backward planet to discuss trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and though no one said it aloud, to evaluate whether humans could behave themselves long enough to join the galactic community as anything other than a curiosity. The summit would take place in the newly constructed Harmony Dome in Geneva, a gleaming architectural marvel built with both human engineering and alien technical guidance. It featured atmosphere-controlled chambers for species with exotic breathing requirements, gravity adjustments for delegates from high or low gravity worlds, and, critically, 17 separate emergency exits. 2 days before the summit, United Nations Secretary-General Okonkwo summoned Jack to his office. Hawkins, we have a situation, Okonkwo said, his usual diplomatic composure showing rare cracks, but the Zorblaxians have issued what they're calling a behavioral ultimatum. Jack groaned. The Zorblaxians, crystalline beings whose bodies resembled finely cut blue diamonds, were notoriously rigid in their thinking. What are their demands? They want proof that humans can conduct a major event without someone saying the phrase. The Secretary-General couldn't bring himself to utter the words. What's the worst that could happen? Jack said reflexively. Okonkwo visibly flinched. Yes, that. If anyone says it during the summit, the Zorblaxians will immediately withdraw and recommend Earth be placed under a development quarantine. Development quarantine was a diplomatic euphemism for these beings are too chaotic to play with the grown-ups. It would mean centuries before Earth could access interstellar trade, technology, and cultural exchange. Humanity would become the galactic equivalent of kids eating paste in the corner of the classroom. So my job is to prevent anyone from saying 6 common words for the entire 3-day summit? Jack clarified. Precisely. You'll have 2 assistants. Okonkwo pressed a button, and the office door opened to reveal a mismatched pair. The woman entered first short, with intelligent eyes and the focused energy of someone who could solve complex problems, while also remembering where you left your keys. Dr. Mira Patel, quantum computing and linguistics specialist, she introduced herself. I've developed software to monitor communication patterns and predict when someone might be about to say, you know. The man behind her was built like someone had asked a child to draw a soldier, then brought the drawing to life. He ducked to enter the room. Rex Thunderbolt, security specialist. Jack raised an eyebrow. That's your actual name? Changed it legally. Previous name was Eugene Fitzwilliam. Got tired of the wedgies. His voice was surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he bench-pressed small vehicles. Jack looked back at Okonkwo. So I have a word predictor and a human intimidation device. Anything else I should know? Yes, the Zorblaxians aren't the only concern. Your friend Krell has informed us that several species have placed bets on how long humans can go without invoking catastrophe. Okonkwo's eye twitched. Apparently there's an interstellar gambling pool with technology exchanges as stakes. Wonderful, Jack muttered. We're the Galactic reality show. One more thing, Okonkwo added as they turned to leave. The Arcturian delegation is bringing a ceremonial artifact, the Orb of Prosperity, as a gesture of goodwill. Under no circumstances should humans touch it without proper protocols. What happens if they do? Rex asked. Okonkwo's expression darkened. The Arcturian ambassador would only say you really don't want to find out. So, you know, don't. As they left the office, Mira activated her tablet. I've already programmed the speech monitoring system to flag potential phrase incidents before they happen, she explained. It analyzes speech patterns and can predict with 87% accuracy when someone is about to say those words. And when it detects something? Jack asked. Rex cracked his knuckles. That's where I come in. Tactical intervention. He means he'll spill drinks, create distractions, or physically remove people if necessary, Mira clarified. Jack nodded slowly. Right. So we're saving Earth's future by potentially assaulting diplomats. Only as a last resort, Rex assured him with a smile that wasn't entirely reassuring. As they reached the exit, Jack couldn't help himself. He stopped as both Mira and Rex whirled on him with panic. Kidding. Just kidding. But as they headed toward the Harmony Dome for security preparations, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the universe was listening, and that it had a particularly twisted sense of humor where humans were concerned. The summit's opening ceremony began smoothly enough. The Harmony Dome glittered under the Geneva sunshine, its adaptive panels shifting to accommodate the various light sensitivity needs of the alien delegates. Inside, Earth's finest diplomats mingled cautiously with beings from across the galaxy. Jack, watching from a monitoring station with Mira and Rex, allowed himself a moment of optimism. Maybe we're overthinking this. Everyone's been briefed on cultural sensitivities. No one's going to say the phrase. Mira's tablet emitted a soft beep. Alert. Phrase potential detected in Sector 3, near the refreshment tables. Jack's heart sank. 20 minutes in. They hadn't even reached the welcome speeches. Rex was already moving, his massive frame surprisingly graceful as he navigated through clusters of delegates. Jack followed, arriving just in time to hear an enthusiastic assistant whispering to a colleague while gesturing to a bizarre alien beverage. Hey, but I mean, what's the worst that? Rex smoothly bumped into the assistant, sending a tray of Earth canopies flying into the air. The distraction worked. The phrase remained incomplete, but now they had 17 tiny quitches on the ceremonial robe of the Havaraxian High Chancellor, whose methane-rich breathing apparatus began to bubble alarmingly. Diplomatic incident brewing in Sector 3, Jack muttered into his communicator. Over the next 2 hours, Mira's system detected 13 near utterances of the forbidden phrase. Rex prevented 7 through strategic interventions. Jack personally handled 5 through rapid conversation redirects. The remaining incident was averted when an alien delegate's translator glitched, turning the humans' what's the worst into praise the fungal colonies of Betelgeuse, which coincidentally delighted the mushroom-based Mycerians. Then came the artifact ceremony. The Arcturians, tall, elegant beings with skin that resembled moving constellations, presented their orb of prosperity with great solemnity. The crystalline sphere, about the size of a basketball, glowed with an inner light that shifted between colors. It was housed in an anti-gravity field inside an ornate container. This sacred artifact, announced the Arcturian ambassador, represents the prosperity that comes from wise risk management and careful consideration of consequences. Jack couldn't have scripted a better message himself. He relaxed slightly, watching as the ceremony proceeded according to protocol. Then he noticed a human technician frowning at the container's control panel. "Something's wrong with the anti-grav stabilizer," the technician whispered to his supervisor. "The field's fluctuating." The supervisor peered at the readings. "Can you fix it?" The technician hesitated. "Maybe? I mean, what's the—" Jack lunged forward, but he was too far away. Mira's system blared an alert. Rex was on the opposite side of the chamber. Worst that could happen? The words hung in the air like a curse. Several alien delegates gasped. A Zorblaxian crystalline structure actually cracked with distress. Krell, watching from nearby, closed all 3 sets of eyelids as if unable to bear witnessing what would follow. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with perfect cosmic timing, the anti-gravity field hiccuped. The orb of prosperity dropped approximately 3 centimeters, bounced against the bottom of its container, and began to glow more intensely. "Is it supposed to do that?" someone whispered. The Arcturian ambassador's star-field face contorted in alarm. "The orb has been activated. It's initiating a prosperity assessment." "That doesn't sound so bad," Jack offered weakly. "The orb evaluates worthiness by simulating worst-case scenarios based on local thought patterns," the ambassador explained hurriedly, backing away. "It then manifests symbolic representations of—" The orb pulsed once, twice, then projected a holographic display above the assembly. To Jack's horror, it began playing a montage of Earth's most catastrophic moments. Natural disasters, accidents, every conceivable thing that could go wrong had gone wrong. With dramatic music. "It's accessing our broadcast archives," Mira whispered, checking her tablet. "And our disaster movies." The alien delegates watched in mounting horror as the orb showcased humanity's intimate relationship with calamity, complete with helpful statistical analysis of how many disasters began with someone wondering what the worst outcome might be. The Zorblaxian delegation's leader turned to Secretary General Okonkwo. "This confirms our concerns. Your species actively invites chaos." "That's not fair," Okonkwo protested. "Those are isolated incidents in fictional scenarios." As if responding to the denial, the orb's display shifted to live security feeds from around the Harmony Dome, highlighting 7 different humans in the process of actions that predictive models showed had high disaster potential. Krell slithered over to Jack. "This is unprecedented. The orb has never reacted so enthusiastically to any species before." "Is there an off switch?" Jack asked desperately. "The orb will deactivate once it completes its assessment," Krell explained. "Or when it runs out of material." Jack looked at the montage of human disaster potential playing above them. "So basically never." Across the room, Rex tried to reach the orb but was blocked by security protocols and increasingly agitated alien delegates. Mira's system was now registering dozens of linguistic alarm patterns as humans throughout the dome reacted to the crisis with their characteristic "what's the worst that could happen" fatalism. And then, because the universe really does have a sense of humor, the Harmony Dome's automated climate system malfunctioned in response to the orb's energy output. The lights flickered. The gravity adjusters surged. And somewhere in the methane atmosphere section, something went click in a way that mechanical things should never go click. "We need to evacuate," Mira announced, checking her readings. "Multiple systems are failing." As delegates began moving toward exits, Jack found himself standing next to the activated orb, watching chaos unfold around him, and thinking that somehow this was exactly the worst that could happen. That's when he had a terrible, wonderful idea. "I need your help," Jack said, gathering Mira, Rex, and a reluctantly curious Krell. "I think I know how to fix this." "Does it involve punching things?" Rex asked hopefully. "Because I've identified several structural elements that look punch-worthy." "No punching," Jack said. "We need to change the narrative. The orb is feeding on our worst-case scenarios, right?" Mira nodded. "It's essentially a quantum probability engine, manifesting potential disaster scenarios based on local thought patterns." "So what if we flip the script?" Jack suggested. "Instead of trying to prevent humans from saying the phrase, we embrace it but change what follows." Krell's scales shifted skeptically. "Explain." "Operation Best Case Scenario," Jack announced. "We get humans to say the phrase, but immediately follow it with absurdly positive outcomes. Flood the orb's probability matrix with so much optimism it can't process it." "That's not how the orb works," Krell protested. "How do you know?" Jack challenged. "Has anyone ever tried to overload it with positive probabilities?" Krell's hesitation was answer enough. "It might work," Mira said, studying her tablet. "The orb seems to function on quantum probability calculations. If we introduce enough improbable positive outcomes, we might create a calculation paradox." "And then what happens?" Rex asked. Mira shrugged. "Best case? The orb resets. Worst case? We create a quantum singularity that swallows Geneva." "Let's aim for the reset," Jack decided. "Rex, I need you to gather the human delegates. Mira, hack the dome's communication system. Krell, we need you to explain this to the other alien representatives so they don't panic more than they already are." Krell's tail twitched nervously. "This plan relies on the exact human unpredictability that concerns us." "Exactly," Jack grinned. "We're going to weaponize our chaotic nature." Within minutes, Rex had corralled a group of confused human diplomats. Mira had patched into the dome systems, and Krell, against his better judgment, was explaining Jack's insane plan to increasingly intrigued alien delegates. "When I give the signal," Jack instructed the humans, "I need you to say the phrase, 'what's the worst that could happen?' But immediately follow it with the most ridiculously positive outcome you can imagine. The more absurd, the better." "This is highly irregular diplomatic procedure," objected one ambassador. "So is creating a quantum disaster with a prosperity artifact," Jack countered. "Unusual problems require unusual solutions." As systems continued to malfunction around them, Jack gave the signal. Mira activated the dome-wide communication system. The first diplomat stepped forward nervously. "What's the worst that could happen?" "We all spontaneously develop telepathy and achieve perfect understanding across species." The orb's display flickered briefly. Another tried, "What's the worst that could happen?" The dome transforms into an intergalactic peace garden that produces self-replicating cookies. More interference in the holographic disaster montage. As more humans joined in, each statement more absurdly optimistic than the last. The orb's projections began to stutter and shift. Disaster scenarios started intermingling with improbable utopian visions, nuclear explosions that turned into rainbow butterfly swarms, but collapsing buildings that reassembled into magnificent ice cream palaces. Krell watched in fascination. "It's creating probability hybrids. I've never seen this behavior before." The alien delegates, initially alarmed, began watching with increasing interest. The Zorblaxians, despite their earlier threats, were studying the phenomenon with particular intensity. What's the worst that could happen? Rex boomed, getting into the spirit. Everyone gets superpowers that can only be used for universal healthcare. The orb pulsed erratically now, its glow cycling through colors faster than the eye could track. Jack stepped directly in front of it, locked eyes with the artifact, and delivered the coup de grace. What's the worst that could happen? The worst thing becomes the best thing, creating a paradox of such perfect symmetry that the universe finally gets the joke. The orb froze. Its light dimmed, then brightened to almost painful intensity. The holographic display collapsed, reformed, then exploded into a shower of harmless light particles that rained down on the assembly like benevolent confetti. Then, with a sound like a satisfied sigh, the orb returned to its dormant state. The dome's systems, one by one, returned to normal function. In the silence that followed, the Arcturian ambassador approached Jack. In 3,000 years, no one has ever confused the orb into submission. There was something like respect in his constellation eyes. Humans specialize in the improbable, Jack replied with a modest shrug. The Zorblaxian delegation conferred among themselves, their crystalline bodies chiming softly. Finally, their leader stepped forward. We withdraw our ultimatum, the Zorblaxian announced. Any species that can turn their greatest liability into a problem-solving strategy deserves further observation. Jack wasn't sure if that was a compliment, but he'd take it. As the emergency subsided and the summit cautiously resumed, Jack noticed something unexpected. Alien delegates were approaching humans, not with their previous caution, but with curious interest. The near disaster had somehow evolved into the most effective icebreaker in diplomatic history. I don't understand, Krell admitted, slithering up beside Jack. By all logical standards, this should have ended in catastrophe. Jack smiled. Welcome to the human experience, Krell. Sometimes our worst qualities are also our best. That makes no sense whatsoever, Krell replied. Exactly, said Jack. And what's the worst that could happen if you embrace that? Krell's scales shimmered with what might have been his species' version of laughter. The final day of the summit arrived with an atmosphere remarkably different from what anyone had anticipated. Instead of the tense formal proceedings originally planned, the schedule had been revised to include a series of workshops on probability manipulation and crisis creativity, led by, of all people, Jack and his team. Jack stood before a mixed audience of humans and aliens, still somewhat baffled by this turn of events. To summarize yesterday's, incident, he began, we discovered that our human tendency to invoke worst-case scenarios can actually be repurposed into a unique problem-solving methodology. The Arcturian ambassador nodded enthusiastically, the stars in his face forming what appeared to be a smile. The orb of prosperity has been in our possession for millennia, and never has it experienced a probability paradox of such magnitude. Our mathematicians are still studying the data. Secretary General Okonkwo, who had aged approximately 10 years during the previous day's crisis, looked cautiously optimistic. So Earth's standing in the galactic community hasn't been damaged? On the contrary, said the leader of the Zorblaxian delegation. After consultation with the Galactic Council, we have created a new diplomatic classification for humanity. Jack held his breath. Here it comes, he thought. Earth is now designated as a Probability Inversion Zone, the Zorblaxian announced. All visiting species will be advised that conventional risk assessment models do not apply here. Is that good? Okonkwo whispered to Jack. It's not development quarantine, Jack whispered back. I'd call that a win. Krell, who had been appointed as the official liaison between Earth and the galactic community, slithered forward. Furthermore, the Council has established what we're calling the Human Contingency Protocol for dealing with certain types of crises throughout the galaxy. The what now? Jack asked. In situations where conventional approaches fail, where the probability matrix becomes too complex for standard resolution, we will now consider, what would humans do? Krell's inner eyelids blinked rapidly, which Jack had come to recognize as the reptilian equivalent of amusement. Jack wasn't sure whether to be flattered or concerned. So were the Galactic Plan B? More like Plan Z, Krell clarified. The option that defies all conventional logic but might work when nothing else will. Mira, who had been analyzing the summit's outcomes on her tablet, looked up with a grin. According to my calculations, we've just been classified as the galaxy's chaos consultants. Rex nodded approvingly. I've been called worse. As the summit concluded with the signing of various trade and cultural exchange agreements far more than had been originally anticipated, Jack found himself standing with Krell on the Harmony Dome's observation deck. Watching Earth's sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed a bit more vivid after nearly causing an interstellar incident. You know, Krell said, there's an old saying among my people, predictability brings safety, but unpredictability brings evolution. That's surprisingly philosophical for a species so focused on risk prevention, Jack observed. Krell's scales rippled. Perhaps we've been influenced by our recent exposure to humans. As they watched the sunset, a junior human diplomat approached them, looking nervous. Excuse me, Mr. Hawkins? The Arcturians are proposing a joint research project on quantum probability manipulation, and the project leader suggested that you might be interested. Who's the project leader? Jack asked. Ambassador Krell. The junior diplomat replied. Jack turned to Krell in surprise. You? I've developed a scientific curiosity about human probability paradoxes, Krell admitted. Besides, someone needs to ensure you don't accidentally invert reality while examining its boundaries. Jack laughed. Sounds like a challenging project. What's the worst that could happen? As soon as the words left his mouth, both he and Krell froze. Then, slowly, Krell's mouth opened in what Jack now recognized as a Vexidorian smile. Indeed, Krell replied. What's the worst that could happen? The phrase that had once triggered alarm among aliens had somehow transformed into a galactic inside joke, a reminder that sometimes facing the worst possibilities head-on was the first step toward finding the best solutions. As news of Earth's diplomatic success spread across the planet, humans everywhere were both amused and oddly proud to learn of their new status. Humanity hadn't joined the galactic community as the most advanced species, or the wisest, or even the most responsible. Instead, they'd found their niche as the species that made friends with chaos and occasionally convinced it to play nice with others. In diplomatic circles throughout the galaxy, a new toast was making the rounds at receptions and ceremonies, offered with equal parts humor and genuine respect. To the humans, may they continue to ask what's the worst that could happen, and may we all benefit when they prove the universe wrong. Jack thought it had a nice ring to it.